For information, Jennifer took benzonidazole and didn't react badly to it.
And do you deal with patients in later stages of the illness?
Yes, I have a 62-year-old patient called Juan. 8 years ago, he was diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy, and Chagas was also detected in him. If he'd been tested for Chagas earlier in his life, his long-term prospects would have been better. A year after the diagnosis, Juan was found to have type 2 diabetes. This was dealt with relatively well, though his body did initially reject insulin. Juan took drugs for his heart and for several years was reasonably stable, but eventually monitoring revealed severe cardiac deterioration. His experience is very much what you'd expect in someone who's had the disease for years, and it's reached the latter stages. There's no cure, and the main recommendations are rest, exercise, and appropriate diet.
I see. And what can be done to combat Chagas generally?
Plenty. Researchers...
Sorry, I think I just stopped sharing my screen, but I think it's back, hopefully. Did you get the correct answer that time? The correct answer was 35, was A. And he said it was what you'd expect. So the development of the illness was what you'd expect. Some people might have put B because they might have heard the information about diabetes, that he was diagnosed with diabetes after a year, I believe, a year after his original diagnosis of Chagas. So it wasn't an incorrect initial diagnosis. So that was a distractor. The initial diagnosis was Chagas, and then he was diagnosed as diabetic. The medication he took was largely ineffective, and actually it said for several years he was reasonably stable with the drugs that he was taking, so that's not right. Okay, let's listen to the last part here. So Dr. Robson thinks the short-term priority in the fight against Chagas is to, and if you remember, the correct answer is B, produce medication in a form that is suitable for children. The key here is short-term priority. At the beginning, he starts talking about long-term solutions, but he says that could take, I think he says 10 years to perfect. So just listen out for those two things.
Recommendations are rest, exercise, and appropriate diet.
I see. And what can be done to combat Chagas generally?
Plenty. Researchers are working on improved drugs to treat it and a vaccine. None currently exists, but it takes at least 10 years to supply a new drug. Another idea is...
So it says it takes at least 10 years to supply a new drug. So design and manufacture a viable vaccine, yes, but that's not a short-term solution. Okay, 1 second.
10 years to supply a new drug. Another idea is to develop the existing drugs in tablets of different sizes. That could and should be done almost overnight.
That could and should be done almost overnight, short-term priority, so you should be kind of listening for, oh, maybe that's the answer.
Currently available is designed for adults, even though infant to supply a new drug. Another idea is to develop the existing drugs in tablets of different sizes. That could and should be done almost overnight. What's currently available is designed for adults, even though infants often have the disease. There are also some very important programs using insecticides and...
So he said that could and should be done very soon. And what we have now is designed for adults, and we need medication for children. So that for infants, he said, yeah. I'll just finish the recording.
Methods to wipe out the bugs that transfer Chagas to humans, but initiatives like those take decades rather than years.
Well, Dr. Jack Robson.
And that was the last distractor, increase efforts to eliminate the insects which carry the parasite, but he said, but that could take decades rather than years. So, you know, we're really listening for the key words. Short-term priority, the key word there was, I've totally forgotten what exactly his words were, but he was basically saying, you know, in the next year or so or something like that. But you've got to listen out for those key words. And he also talked about things that could happen, as I just said, in the next 10 years, but that is not short term, it's very long term. Okay.